Welcome back, everybody, to A Little Less Fear podcast. I would like to introduce Isabeau Maxwell, also known as Beau. Yes?
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
Excellent. Beau Maxwell is one of the leading spiritual coaches in intuitive development today. She brings deep channeled knowledge and personal understanding to the field of spirituality, my favorite. She has helped people connect to their authentic, natural, intuitive ability since 2005. She's the founder of the award-winning intuitive development course, The Sage Method, the author of the best-selling book, Cracking Open Adventures of a Reluctant Medium, and the creator of the popular online community, The Sage Circle. Welcome to A Little Less Fear podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely, this is a pleasure. I love intuits, I love mediums, and I love psychics, and I love it all. And I feel that there's just no coincidence in our connection. So thank you so much for being on my show.
Timing was perfect.
Yeah, I'll say. Hey, so Beau, tell us about your journey. What brought you to where you are at today?
Well, it was quite a leap, I'm going to be honest. Up until the age of 32, I was complete skeptic. I wouldn't say like trying to prove that anything was wrong skeptic. I just had nothing to do with any of it. Nothing to do with religion, nothing to do with spirituality. I got a math degree from college. I was, in the business world, et cetera, et cetera. At 32, my grandmother passed away and I was halfway across the country, so I couldn't be by her side, and called into hospice. I was on the phone when she passed. And I remember hanging up the phone. I came out and told my family. They lovingly went to the grocery store to get chocolate and wine. Good job. And I was standing there in my living room. It was the middle of the day. And I was trying to decide, do I completely fall apart? Because she was like my mom. Do I completely fall apart, or do I jump online and get plane tickets, right? Or try to figure that out. And in this decision process, she showed up in my living room right in front of me. And it wasn't even off to the side where people say they catch something off the corner of your eye. It was right in front of me. And she was about 70% solid. And it frightened me. That's really no other way to say it. I remember just jumping back and, panicking for a minute. And then she was standing sideways, turned and looked at me, winked, smiled, and left.
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
it was a monstrous wow, because up until this point, I had been taught, by my parents that none of this is real. Psychics aren't real, intuitives aren't real, there are no ghosts, there's no such thing as any of that, right?
Right.
So the only reference point I had was horror movies and things like this. So my body and my mind reacted to it as such, even though it was my grandmother. Immediately after she disappeared, I remember thinking, wait a minute, what if that was you?
Right.
Because I didn't want to lose her. And I wrote it off as grief, hallucination. Logical. Went to bed, woke up the next morning, and my husband said to me, I had the weirdest dream last night. It was your grandmother. She was so real. This is what she was wearing. And he described in detail the clothing that she was wearing when I saw her in the living room the day before.
Oh, wow.
And I remember feeling almost like a punch in the gut. It was just, oh, okay, what are we going to do with this? And so I was so out of the spiritual circles. Like I didn't have anything to do with any of it. I had judgmental opinions of it, as a matter of fact. And so I found the only person I had a reference point to, which was a local Tai Chi instructor. And this man is so kind, because I awkwardly walked into his office. He knew me, I knew him through other business situations, like a fitness center, et cetera. And I said, you're the weirdest person I know. Can you help me? And I still today look back on that one and go, rude, Beau, rude. But maybe I was a little ruder back then. And he just wrapped his arms around me and said, yeah, talk to me. What's going on?
Wow.
And he helped me establish yes and no intuition first. And that's what I had to rely on.
Yes and no intuition? What?
Yes and no intuition. Yeah. Oh, yes and no intuition is so powerful, because it's so, it's on opposite ends. You know what I mean? They're so different that when you can establish how your intuition speaks yes, how it speaks no, you can use that in your day-to-day life. I use it constantly to this day. So he taught me that.
We're gonna go over that. right?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. Absolutely. Love to. Yeah. But he taught me that, and I didn't see her again right away. It took me months to really settle back into it. And I met an intuitive guide. I started to finally see her and hear her again. And then I met my first intuitive guide. He taught me 90% of everything I know at this point. And when he sort of wrapped up his teaching with me, it was like 2 years.
Oh,
I was then a
wow.
professional intuitive. I was doing
Whoa.
readings, and that's when, about year 3 is when he said to me, take everything I taught you, bring it into the world, and walk other people through it. And that was the beginning of the Sage method back in 2007, 2008. And I still teach it to this day. I've been teaching it for like, I don't even know what that is, 15 years or something now. And that's how I got to this point. But it was quite a transition. So yeah, I went from complete skeptic to, this is my life now. This is my authentic me.
So take me back to the Reiki master that you spoke to, and he was
Yes,
telling you
he
about
was
the yes or no intuition. What did he teach you about yes or no intuition?
he yeah, he's a Reiki master, and he's also a Tai Chi instructor. He taught me to some of the most key important facts, and
Oh
two
wait, you
important
said
tips.
Tai Chi master.
Yeah,
How did
but
I
he's
get
a
Reiki
Reiki
master?
master.
Oh,
I didn't
see,
say that, and you picked up on it, and you knew
yes,
it.
I did.
Yes, you did. Yes, because I ended up getting Reiki 1 and 2 with him eventually. So yeah, he's a Reiki
Wow.
master too, and you picked up on that. I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. But he helped me to stop and to hold still and to sit.
Okay.
The whole issue around not being able to access your intuition, because I tell people this, everyone is intuitive, strong intuition, accurate messages. The only difference between someone that's getting all these accurate messages and somebody that isn't is that they're not blocked. So you have to figure out what's blocking you. You have to start living your authentic self.
Yeah.
And kind of like let go of the baggage and the coats that you put on metaphorically to try to be someone else. I mean, a lot of this blocks your intuition. So getting quiet with yourself and letting the agreed upon reality fade away is a big deal. But he started by teaching me to just sit, relax, ask for a yes, and then sit, relax, ask for a no. What was valuable with what he taught is he taught it with pendulum work at first with me. And the pendulum is just where it swings one way, it's a yes, swings the other, it's a no. But what he taught me was to feel it, to learn to distinguish the feeling between a yes and the feeling between a no. And initially for me, it was this rush that would go through me if it was a yes. And if the answer was a no, it was just hollow, right? Over time, I started to be able to get visuals for intuitive information and start to see things. I started seeing spirits. So today it's morphed a little bit. If I ask a yes or no question, as silly as this sounds, today, if it's a yes, giant letters will kind of pop down from the sky in front of me, just say yes, or, big, huge NO. And
Did you intentionally ask for it to be that way for you to get yes or no that clearly, or did that just happen, like kind of evolve with time?
no, and that was the magic with what he was showing me initially, which was, don't decide how it's going to come through.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Your sixth sense uses all 5 of your other senses. So if somebody's sitting there going, I'm trying to see something, trying to see something, trying to see something, but really their intuitive channel thrives through hearing something, they're going to miss it because they're expecting. So let go of expectations, understand that it'll come through, and it comes through differently for everyone.
Everybody.
Some people feel pushed forward for yes, pushed back for no. Some people feel cold or hot. Some people see things or they hear things. I know one woman whose her right ear tingles or her left ear tingles for yes or no. So the beauty of yes and no intuition is that it's so simple, and the answers have such different vibrations that it's very easy to distinguish between them. And then you can use that as a tool.
So when you're discovering your yes and your no, and somebody's doing this for the first time, what's the best advice that you can give someone that's working on their intuition, that's building their intuition in this yes or no? Just be ready to receive a yes with a question, a specific question that you ask. Do you have them write it down? Do you have them meditate on an, I mean, how does it work for you?
I say try a couple of different things. If you have a question, you can say it in your mind, you can say it out loud, you can write it down. You can use a pendulum if that, is a pull for you. You think, okay, that'll help. But my biggest piece of guidance around this, and I think that this is a huge percentage of people's block issues, is we have to learn how to let go of the agreed upon reality. And what I mean by that is what we're looking for, the yes and no, whether it's a sensation, a sound, or a vision, that's not in the material world. So this is where my logical self from the past comes in that this whole world, this material world, right? We've got molecules, and then we have space in between the molecules. We're not looking for something that's in the molecules, that's in the solid. You're actually looking for what's in between the molecules. So and I'll give this example. When you see something, when you catch something out of the corner of your eye, and then you turn to see what it is, I have never said this to somebody that they haven't gone, yep, that's happening. It's happened to absolutely everybody. You catch something out of the corner of your eye and you turn to look at it, and it disappears.
It's gone. Yeah.
There's a reason. When you turn to look at it, your human focus, your eyes are trying, you're looking at a wall, at a door, at a table, at a chair, you're searching through the material world. What you're looking for isn't in the material world. And as simple as that sounds, it's a game changer, because if you can relax your vision, defocus in any way, shape, or form, scrying, gazing, staring at a candle, just allowing your gaze to soften, any way, shape, or form you can do that, you're going to now be turning your focus away from the material world, and you're going to be focusing on those spaces in between. And that's where source is. That's where the information is. So when you're sitting down to do this yes and no, I would actually say it's not how you ask the question or how the technique on how you step into asking the question. It's more, are you able to let the material world fade away into the background and just stay open and patient? Something will happen.
What are some good yes or no questions?
Oh, okay. So when I met my first guide, I was such a newbie. I didn't even know there were spiritual guides, right? Like no knowledge. So he's this poor spiritual guide. He's such a great guy, and he's trying to help me through all this and explain everything. And then when I finally got the communication going with him, and I started to see him a little more clearly, and I could actually hear, full sentences and stuff from him. One day I was at home and I was like, oh, it dawned on me. I have access to all the answers. And I wrote down all these questions on a piece of paper. What are my kids going to do when they grow up? How much longer are we going to live in this house? When am I going to get a new car? Like I went full on like crystal ball questions, right? I was just like, I'm going for this. And I don't know. And I showed up. Now, mind you, this guide is extremely loving. He comes in and out of my life to this day. But he's a bit of a jokester. And so the way this comes across can sound a little bit crass, but it's exactly what happened. I went out there. There was this one location. I thought I had to be at this one location to talk to him. Like I still didn't understand everything. And he said, I said, oh, I have questions. And he was like, well, ask your questions. And this is beyond yes and no, because I had already established, I had opened up enough that I didn't need to rely just on yes and no anymore. But there's a meaning behind why I'm telling you this story. He said, okay. And I read the first question, and he's like, that's a stupid question. I was like, excuse me? No.
What was the question?
I think the first question I asked him was like, what are my kids going to do when they grow up? So, well, that's a stupid question. I'm like, it's not a stupid question. How long am I going to live in this house? And he goes, until you move out. And I'm like, okay, you're being cheeky, right? And he's like, no, seriously, ask something more important. And he worked with me on it until I finally figured it out. When we ask, my favorite question is, what is it that you want me to know? We are asking of these guides and loved ones that are on the other side.
Right.
They have all of the perspective of what's coming up, what could happen, our path, everything we can't see, they do, right? And
Yeah.
like a 3-year-old, I'm running up to him, grabbing his pant leg, going, "What time is play school starting?" You know, like, and he's like, I'm actually more worried about what's coming. So when you give them the floor, whether it's, so again, this is beyond the yes and no's. This is you've started to feel how your intuition works with yes and no's, and now you've moved deeper into it. But when you can give them the floor, especially in mediumship, you will get so much more. It'll come through stronger with more clarity, because if they do have important messages that are going to be super helpful for you, and they have to put those messages over here to answer your questions about what your grandfather's favorite hobby was, and in their mind they're like, I already know, you know what it was, why are you asking me? You know, like,
Yeah.
if you just if you set all that aside and just let them speak, a lot more will come through.
That's amazing.
Yeah. I learned that very on when I was doing professional readings, and eventually, actually relatively quickly, I would tell sitters that would come in to meet with me to write down their questions, but fold them up or close them up and put them off to the side. Just let me say everything that comes through. Then we'll ask your questions. It was great. We got so much more out of the sessions.
Hey, Beau, for people that are like tuning in for the first time, might be questioning like, well, how do I know what's my intuition versus, what are messages coming in? How can somebody decipher the difference? People that are not really fully aware of that.
You
Sometimes I
mean
have
that?
a hard time explaining that to people myself.
Yeah, you mean that age-old question of, did I make that up?
Yeah.
Yeah. I love that
Yeah,
question.
that's the one.
That's the one. That's the one. I struggled fiercely with that myself, because I was so skeptical, so scientific minded, so 1 + 1 has to equal 2. And I had to let go and relax into it. Over time, over those first few years, I learned that intuition is a pull, imagination is a push. So I
Intuition a
mean,
pull and imagination a push.
intuition is a pull, imagination is a push.
Okay. I love that.
So yeah, if you're like, a metaphor for this would be, if you're walking with a friend down a sidewalk and you're talking about what happened with your day, that's imagination. If you're walking down that sidewalk with your friend and your friend's telling you about what happened their day, that's intuition. So it's I worked with my guide to create a meditation series for this.
Okay.
But everyone can do this. You can even create this in your own way, in a guided meditation series sometimes help, but some people can do this by creating it in their own way. When you step into a meditation, and imagine, just go with this, the good old field. You're in a large field, right? But create it. Actually let yourself use your imagination, and use as many of your senses in it as possible. Smell the grass, feel the wind, I don't know, taste the grass, something. Just try to use multiple senses, but purposely use your imagination. And when you've created a space that you can feel and you're anchored in, then pause with the statement of, if my intuition has anything to say right now, go ahead.
Oh,
And
wow.
just hold still and be patient and wait. And okay, so I'll give you an example. I had
Yeah.
this student, and I walked her through this because before I put the meditations together on audio, I walked her through it in person. And all of a sudden she's sitting there quiet for a while. And then she comes back and she's like, no, you can't make this up. And I'm like, what happened? And she goes, I was sitting there, and she had created the field and all that kind of stuff with her imagination. And then she held still to let her intuition say anything. And she goes, like a 10-foot tall vegetable sandwich dropped out of the sky. And I just started laughing. I was like, what the heck? And she goes, well, I've been trying to go vegan, but it's been really hard. I'm like, well, I think that was your intuition. And when things come through that you don't expect, when you're able to quiet your intent and your desire of the outcome, then it's easier for your intuition to speak.
When you're able to quiet your intent and what
Mhm.
was the other thing you said? Wait,
Desire,
and
a desired
desire.
outcome.
Desired
Yeah.
outcome. Okay. Wow.
If somebody came to me and said, my sister is not doing well, and I tried to tap into my intuition to find out if she would be okay, I would probably stop them and say, chances are good your accuracy is going to be very low, because you have a very, very big intent there. You love your sister.
Right.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So the more attached we are to these things, the harder it is to get information. This is why beginning psychics and beginning mediums, I tell them, do blind experiments, ask friends to give you, a photo or something of someone that you don't know. Any opportunity that you can do a psychic experiment or a mediumship experiment where you don't, your brain doesn't have any input. Like,
Mm-hmm.
if I told you to read this certain famous person, your brain would instantly go through all the things you already know about them. So try to get into situations where you're really reading blind. You have no idea. And that's where all the really powerful, accurate messages are going to come through. The more attached we are, the harder it is. I don't tap into my kids. I don't tap into my kids. I don't tap into my partner. None of that.
Mm-hmm. And that's because it's we're not supposed to, right?
Well, it's partially because I think it's rude. That's just, my opinion.
We're
Tapping into your
crossing
kids.
energetic boundaries.
Yeah, tapping into your kids is like reading their diary. I just don't think it's very cool. And I also kind of like my human stuff. Like,
Yeah.
I dove into my spiritual path, found just depths of compassion that I didn't even know existed before, had to make changes in my life as a result of it. I had to walk away from certain relationships and create new ones. All this transformational stuff happened. And in that process, I learned how much I loved my human path more than I loved it before. And so for me, it's this enjoyable experience that I get to have. So I don't want to lose it. I don't want to taint all of it.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. Yeah, thank you for that. And what can you say for people that are already like practicing their intuition and stuff, as far as like I guess this is for myself. How do I make sure that I don't cross energetic boundaries without wanting to? You know what I mean? I mean, like right now, for example, the whole me reading into your Tai Chi master was a Reiki master. How would I have been able to stop myself and not go there before going there automatically?
That's a great question. Society standards for what's appropriate or not appropriate do not really apply to intuitive source universe standards. That's the first thing I'm going to say. So while you could pick that up, you probably aren't going to randomly pick up something difficult I'm walking through currently, right?
True.
Which thankfully I'm not, but I'm just saying, you're anything that I don't want exposed. My guide, your guide, my grandma, your grandma, they're all going to make sure that information doesn't get transferred to you. And I've had people come in and sit down with me and they've wanted to know things about other people, and the guides come through and they're like, we're not going to share that. So we don't get information that would throw us off of our path. And so hopefully this makes sense with
That
the whole
totally
society
makes sense.
standards and universe and source. The only things that will ever come through, because trust me, if we could talk to anybody or I'd be chatting with Prince tomorrow. Like, that would be my thing. Right. But anything that is not supposed to come through, if a piece of information would derail me, you wouldn't pick it up. You wouldn't pick it up. And I know a lot of people have fear of sitting down with readers and things like this. Don't fear actual intuitive connection. If there is any fear, it would be around somebody that doesn't have your best interest in mind. So, just get referrals instead of an 800 psychic number kind of thing. But no, guides won't tell us what we're not supposed to know. Trust me, I've asked them.
So basically, I guess the rule here is to trust our spirit team because they got our back.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, if you do catch yourself kind of wanting to be nosy, with somebody and kind of pushing in intuitively a little bit, yeah, that's on you. You should probably back off and just let them have their space, right? It's none of our business, right?
Totally.
But if you just casually happen to pick up on,
Yeah.
when I say Tai Chi, your intuition says Reiki master, and you're accurate.
Yeah.
That happens. It
Okay.
happens a lot. So
yeah, that actually makes me feel better, because I do it a lot when I'm talking to people, and they'll look at me like, well, I didn't say that, but that's right on. I'm like, oh no, I don't want to like go into people's lives without their permission. But I guess if their spirit's got their back, and I'm doing this, obviously with good intent and good heart, then I really have nothing to fear.
As long as you're doing it with good intent and good heart, you have nothing to fear. And chances are you probably haven't had a situation where that happened and it hurt someone.
No, it hasn't. I don't, that I'm aware of.
Yep, exactly. It's something that intuitives have to sort of get used to, right? The more you open up your intuition, the more you're able to walk every space that you walk into, you kind of already know the vibe. When you meet somebody, you kind of know that they're like a parent or single or not. So you just kind of get the vibe and the feeling, know. We're staying at a resort and there's somebody close to us, and he just walked out and walked around and walked back into his spot. And I was like, he was a roadie. And then I'm like, oh, I wonder and this is where you get nosy. I wonder who he was a roadie for. And then I went, well, that's inappropriate, Beau. Stop it. Right. So it's a natural part of it. These things kind of, come up a little bit. And honestly, most intuitives that I know, as they open, they find themselves trying to establish a way to kind of shield themselves from that. I call it practiced ignoring. I practice ignoring that piece in order to love my day-to-day human interactions, And the other thing too is that if you do a little bit too much of it, you'll find that you start to draw people toward you that's really all they want from you. And so you have to learn how to set those boundaries too, lovingly.
For sure. Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Hey, Beau, can we go back to your grandmother?
Yeah.
Like after you had that initial vision of her, and then your partner told you that they had a dream about her, what was the next? How did she come to you the next time, and how were you able to interact with her the third or the fourth time?
So he said that, and I let it go. I still brush. I mean, it was impactful. I went to her funeral, so I had to get on a plane and fly there. I went to her funeral. Now I'm an only child, so I don't have any siblings. My cousin was kind of my closest sibling, and we didn't really spend all of our time together. And so she was the one that I trusted the most. I went up to her and said, this is going to sound really strange. Like, this is crazy, right? And I'm like, but this happened. And she didn't even skip a beat. She was like, well, yeah, I saw her the day she passed too. Like, it was normal. And I was like, what? Turns out my family was very intuitive. And my mom, I'm sure in her own loving way, set that boundary around me. And so I wasn't included in those types of conversations with the family. But having heard my cousin say that to me, there was something that went, oh, I'm not wrong. It's not that this might be okay.
Yeah.
So that gave me the boost to say, okay, I'm going to start exploring this. So I get the yes and no questions going. And I started with pendulum, swinging it yes, swinging it no. And I would feel this rush, like the feeling when you go over the hill on a roller coaster and your body gets that kind of rush that goes up.
Yeah.
I would feel that. And then I remember the first time it happened saying, Grandma, is that you? And it happened again. And then I had like a little mini freak out. I was like, okay, I'm really creeped out, because I still was in that whole like haunted ghost mind frame.
Right.
And I would sit down, I would do the pendulum work. And if it was a no, I would feel very hollow, very kind of empty. If it was a yes, I felt goosebumps. And yes and no work at first can be really tedious because it takes a long time. But I played this game called 20 Questions as a kid, so I was pretty good at it. So I would say, is it about a family member? Yes, no. Friend? Yes, no. Me? Yes, no. Work? Yes, no. And I would just, that went on for a good number of months.
With the pendulum?
Yeah, with the pendulum. Anytime I would feel that roller coaster rush, because I couldn't just call on her. I tried. I was like, are you around? So I would have to wait for that rush. And then when it would happen randomly, again, pull, not a push, I just let it happen whenever it happened. I would sit down and focus in, is this you? Do you have a message? And then ask. And I would go off of the goosebumps or the hollow. That was my yes and my no. And I did this for a number of months. It didn't expand or grow or change for a number of months. And I'm, I don't know, stubborn and impatient. And, I need answers. That's my personality. So I remember the day that I got to this, and I wrote about it in my book. I was driving, I was alone, I was running errands, and this was a long time ago. So we didn't have smartphones or anything. And I got the rush. So I pulled over into a parking lot and I did yes and no questions for like 20 minutes because it takes a while to get a message that way. And the message from my grandmother was that my mom would be contacting me because she would need financial help, but I wouldn't be the one to help her. A friend of hers would. I said, okay, because then it was like the night before that I spoke out loud to my grandmother and I said, I love you, but I'm raising 2 small kids and I can't just keep doing this and struggling with the belief around it, and I need help. I need you to just show me something. And the next day she did. She brought that message in. So I continue running errands a little while longer. My mom calls and says, honey, I need some money transferred. Can you go to your bank, get cash, bring it to mine and put it in? Again, this was so long ago that you had to actually do that because there wasn't smartphones.
Yeah.
And I said, yeah, absolutely. And I went to my bank. I got some cash out. I was driving to her bank and I was thinking to myself on the way there, my mom was in accounting. She was in financial different things. You know what I mean? So this isn't a huge stretch. I made this up. And I pull into her bank and I parked in the spot, turned off the car. The phone rang again. And it was my mom. And she said, hey, I just want to stop you. Don't worry about it. My friend Lisa took care of it. And I went,
Wow.
oh. And yeah, it was a huge
High five, grandma.
High five, grandma. It was a huge day for me. I cried, I shook. I remember just because it was like an ocean wave of this is real just crashed into me. And I've never looked back. When that happened, I started to hear her. I started to kind of slightly see her,
Because
right?
you trusted her after that.
I did. I finally trusted it.
Mhm.
And I relaxed and said to myself, this is going to go at the pace it's going to go. It's going to happen the way it's going to happen. I just took a deep sigh of relief that she was still accessible. Right. And then I danced around for a while, just super, skiddity doo happy about the fact that I had a direct line to my grandma.
Yeah.
It was awesome, right?
Yeah.
Because like I said, she was
Direct
like my
line.
mom. She was the biggest, maternal kind of role. And I was in a grocery store. This was a few months after that. Now I could see her, I could talk to her, I could see my guide in the woods, I could talk to him. But that's the only interaction. And I was in the grocery store. And I walked down an aisle and there was 3 people in the aisle. All right. And I turned to get something off the shelves and I turned back and there's now like 6 and half of them are transparent. And I freaked out. I panicked and I literally ran out of the grocery
Wow.
store, which cracks me up because there's now 3 people that have a really fun dinner story, right? About this crazy lady that just bolted right out of, and I jumped in my car. And by this point, I was so used to communicating with my grandmother that she was in my passenger seat and she showed up when I jumped in the car, panicked.
Visually, you could see her?
I could visually see her. I mean, I only saw her at 70% solid the very first time.
Right.
Now all my intuition, I would say it's probably about 20-30% solid.
Okay.
And so I can see her and I looked at her and I said, did you see that? I was in such a panic. And she looks at me and she goes, well, what did you think was going to happen? I was like, I thought I was just going to talk to you. I thought it was going to be you and me forever. Like, ride or die, like you and me. Come on, let's go. And she was
Ride
like,
or
no,
die.
that's not how it works. And so I started to get the courage to tell friends. And then I did readings for friends and then friends of friends. And then next thing you know, the demand was there. I was doing professional readings and then I started to teach.
Goodness. What an incredible story.
Yeah, it's been
That's
a
amazing.
journey.
Yeah, it's an amazing,
But
amazing.
I'm so glad it happened though, because it's just I'm all of me now. Like there's no masking, there's no hiding, there's no depression. It's, I mean, I have tough times still. It's not perfect
Yeah, you're
life.
actually answering me. I was about to ask you how has this changed your life, and you're already telling me. So there was depression before, and all of this is cleared because now you have an intuition that's just so sharp that you trust all the messages coming in and everything that you feel and see.
Yeah, this interesting thing happens with intuition. When you open it, you start to connect to the things that are meaningful to your spirit versus what you were taught, right? Many of the things we're taught are great and wonderful and perfect, but sometimes we're taught a programming that doesn't work with us, but we still
Right,
do it.
right,
And when you open up your intuition, you just start to see your spirit with more clarity, what you're passionate about with more clarity. You start to feel more resistance to the things that don't line up with you,
right.
energetically. I'll say it that way.
Yeah,
And then you start making incremental small changes in your life, and that inadvertently brings more happiness.
absolutely.
I look back before I opened, this is a sad thing to say, but I probably cried myself to sleep 1 or 2 nights a week out of the stress that I had just constantly been putting on myself my whole life. Um, I think I cried once like 7 months ago. And, I think it was a Hallmark commercial. So life really changes,
Right. It does. Oh
when
yeah,
you
I
start
agree with
to
you.
live your bliss.
Totally agree with you. 100% right there. I mean, I've
Yeah.
had the same experience. So
Yeah.
tell us about the Sage Method. Tell us about your incredible book.
So the book was interesting. That Cracking Open Adventures of a Reluctant Medium could not be a better title. That's literally it. It's the first 2 years of this journey. So of kind of what I've been talking about, grandma passing and how I opened up and how I honed my intuition. And I love that book because even though I was a math major, didn't do so great in English, I had an amazing editor, and I told him, I want this book to be fun to read, interesting, and to read. So we wrote it as memoirs. So it's like a story line, which is a little bit more fun to follow, but it's a great book. And there's a lot of teaching in it, even though it's not a quote teaching type book. And it's all about what happens when you take a stubborn Taurus skeptic and, have dead people show up. So I say that with love, but the Sage Method is a 7-week intuitive development course, actually. And it's
Oh,
a bit of a
wow.
formula. Yeah, it's intense. But my guide, like I said, between year 2 and 3, my guide, I was working as a professional intuitive. I was doing clearing works, spiritual clearings and things like this. He was the one that said, go back to everything that I taught you over these years and put it together and give it to other people so that they can open up their intuition too. Because I believe this with every ounce of my being. It's not a gift, it's an ability. And everyone has it. It's just a matter of,
Yeah.
is it covered or not covered? So the special factor, I like to take that away really quickly and remind
I'm
people
sorry.
that
What do you mean covered or not covered?
is it covered with clutter or not covered with clutter?
Oh, got you, got you.
Yeah. The personal programming,
Okay.
your lifestyle, things like this. So I like to help people sort of walk through that. So the course gives you not only tools to do the inner work, which brings more happiness. That's probably my favorite part of the course, but it shows you, it talks about how everything works. Like there's a lot of it where I'm teaching like how soul groups connect, the transition process, how intuition goes through our bodies, all that kind of stuff. And then it also invites you to do intuitive exercises in a way that you get to figure out how they flow through you uniquely, right? You get to try on a whole bunch of different techniques to figure out which ones work for you and which ones don't. And it's a joy. I've been teaching people the Sage Method all over the world for years. And it's my heart. It's what I love. Absolutely love it. So, but yeah, 2 years down to 7 weeks is pretty good. And I tell people
Yeah, I'll
that's
say it
the
is.
shortest I could make it. And we have people that we've got professional intuitives that take it and ramp up what they're already doing. We have people that have never done it before and then, open up their intuition finally. But it's it's not an end path. It's just all the tools you need to make the most of your intuitive connection.
I love it. It's amazing. Hey,
Oh, I love it.
But when you think back at the time when you were 32, or were you 32 or 34 when your grandmother passed? I mean, I can imagine, since your intuition wasn't polished the way it is now, that you would have never known this would have been your career.
Nope.
So what do you think of this now? Was this a path that you feel was eventually going to happen? Do you feel that this was your destiny? Do you feel that you maybe it fell into your lap, or that you were called to do it like a mission? What do you feel about your current, career change? Or I guess the way it changed into, the way it morphed.
Well, I will say this right out of the gate, and my whole team, I've got a team that works at my company, and we all kind of feel the same way. It's great to have a business in the spiritual world because everyone's so nice. Everyone's so loving. It's like, oh, even when somebody has an issue, they're like, hey, and you're like, awesome, and we'll work together and fix it. It's great. It's just way different than like,
Yeah.
a law firm or a bank or something. It's so that part of it is really wonderful. What I now know, like I can look back, and for so many years after I opened up, I was like, why, right? And now
Yeah.
I can finally look back and I get it. I have taught tens of thousands of people all over the globe, right? I have a spiritual community now of people that, they might not have it in their immediate circle. So they have this online community called the Sage Circle, where you are loved unconditionally for exactly who you are in your intuitive journey. And I've been able to spread this across the globe because that's what I did before, right? I was good at building businesses. I was good at building connections, and I was good at building, getting information into the hands of many people. And I'm like, okay, I see what you did there. You got somebody who knew how to do that.
Yeah.
And who was extremely skeptic and stubborn and went all the way to wide open, because the end result is now I can sit here today and say two things. Number one, if I can do it, anyone can do it. Right. I prove that over and over again. Right.
Yeah.
And number two, if I can take the knowledge and the tools that I was born with and I used in my previous life and apply it to connecting people like this, that's a wonderful thing. That's a wonderful thing. And I think that's why I think that's why they picked me out to do it.
So then, you feeling that they picked you out, they literally, it became your mission because you were chosen.
Yeah, I feel like it was a turning point. I feel like they went, okay, here's a need that needs to be filled. And they looked for somebody and went, you're going to fill it. And I went, what? No, I didn't, because I had no clue until years later, and I could look back and go, oh, it makes sense. It makes sense now.
Yeah.
Because my personality type, like I'm a huge cheerleader. If I can see one person succeed, that's made my day. Right. So I'm a huge cheerleader. I just love building things. Like I love doing that and connecting people. So it makes sense that they would have me do this and provide a safe place too. I'm really big on that, providing a safe place for people. And I also walked through a large period of time afraid of what people thought of me, afraid of what they would think if I said I was a psychic medium, right? And I didn't have anyone to talk to about all these things that were happening.
Yeah.
And I don't know about you, but when you're in that position and you meet someone, you're like, oh, can I tell you all this? Because it can be very lonely for us.
Yeah, it can. It totally can. Yeah.
And so that was the birth of my spiritual community, to give people that place. I'm like, I don't want anyone to have to struggle through opening their intuition on their own.
Right.
Here's the tools. Here's what you need to walk through. Right. And I don't want anyone to be alone with an experience that they had, feeling like they can't share it with somebody. here's the community where you can share it. So if my passion comes through, maybe you could tell. I feel like massively grateful, like massively grateful. It's way better than just working on spreadsheets all day, which is what I used to do.
Oh, totally.
So,
well, Beau, I'm massively grateful to have come in contact with you. I'm so grateful that our paths crossed and that you got to be on my show, and that so many more people are going to gain their confidence and their intuition just from listening to this podcast. How can people learn more about you, more about the Sage Method, and where can we find your book?
everything can be found on the main website, which is thesagemethod.com.
Okay.
And THESAGE method.com. And I've put together a free course on there too, that people can just start right now, the tools that they can start using right away, because I am really passionate about everyone stepping toward their spiritual path.
Thank you so much for being on A Little Less Fear podcast. Maybe I'll we'll psychically tune into each other and keep in touch. I love this connection, and I love your connection with spirit and your grandma. I have a connection with my grandma on the other side too. So like grandma power. Yeah.
I know you told me that story, and I got to tell you, grandmas are great. Grandmas are the best. They're absolutely the best.
They really are. Thanks so much, Beau, for all of your energy and all of your wisdom light. I wish you many blessings and all of your loved ones too.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you.